Welcome to Book Summary Podcast, your gateway to personal transformation. Each episode delivers big ideas from the world's most impactful books on mindset, productivity, and success, all in just a few minutes. Ready to turn knowledge into action? Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take some really interesting material, could be anything, and really dig into it, pull out the key ideas for you.
Yeah, think of it like getting the highlights, but also those little details that make you think, I never thought of it that way.
Exactly. And today, we're jumping into some pretty significant, maybe even challenging stuff. We've got excerpts from Jordan B. Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, and Antidote to Chaos.
Right. And it's a book that doesn't really shy away from the big questions, does it? It tackles human nature, reality, meaning, the whole 9 yards.
That for sure.
Hey.
So our mission, our goal for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the most impactful ideas from this specific viewpoint. We're looking at how it frames reality, what it says about us as humans, the good and the bad, where meaning comes from.
And maybe most importantly, how this whole framework suggests we should navigate life, given all the difficulties and, frankly, the suffering that seems built into existence.
Think of this session like we're learning to read a new map together. It might look complicated at first.
Yeah, the terrain it describes can feel a bit stark, maybe even hostile sometimes, because it really leans into the harsh realities. But the idea presented is that understanding this map, understanding these fundamental forces it talks about, is crucial for finding your way.
Okay, so right off the bat, what's something that really jumps out from this material? It seems to present the world like structured around these two fundamental forces, right?
Exactly. That's the core duality you hit on. The whole book really orbits around these two massive concepts, order and chaos.
Order and chaos.
Yeah, and they're not just like psychological states in your head. They're presented as fundamental parts of reality itself. They shape the world outside and our experience inside.
Okay, so let's unpack order first. What does that look like according to the source material?
Order is, it's the explored territory, the known world. It's the stable structures we build and rely on, things like tradition, society, predictability.
So like the everyday stuff, family, home.
Exactly. Family, home, your country, the money you use, your daily schedule, a classroom setup, clocks, even just basic politeness and how we interact. It's all part of order.
It's where things make sense, where behavior lines up with what you expect.
Precisely. It's the solid ground, The analogy used is like skating on thin ice. Order is the ice you can skate on because you understand it. It's hierarchy, authority, patterns older than us. Even our biology is ordered to fit social structures.
The tribe, religion, the home fires.
Right. The flag, trains on time, the face we show the world, it's where you know the rules and things generally work out as planned. Predictability, security.
But it's not presented as purely good, is it? There's a potential dark side to order too.
Absolutely. That's a key point. When order becomes too dominant, too rigid, it tips over. It becomes oppressive. Think tyranny, stagnation, creativity gets crushed, uniformity demanded. So too much order is definitely a problem.
Okay, so order is the known, the structured. What about chaos?
Chaos is the flip side. It's the unexplored territory, the great unknown. It's described as formless potential, but also disruption, uncertainty, danger.
So the world outside your comfort zone? Or even inside yourself?
Both. The world you don't control, but also the parts of your own mind you don't understand. The source uses metaphors like the deep sea floor or, Smaug's lair from Tolkien, places of darkness, unknown threats.
And chaos is where things fall apart.
Yeah, that's the classic experience of chaos. The bottom drops out, the ice breaks, you fall through into the cold water. Your expectations, they don't match reality anymore. The world just refuses to play by your rules.
That sounds terrifying.
It can be. Dreadful freedom is one way it's put. Anything can happen, good or bad. It's the space outside our current map. And interestingly, the book notes that when our ancestors first encountered the unknown, like the non-human world, their brains, already wired for social structures, tried to understand it by applying categories like male and female. Shows how deep this ordering instinct goes.
Wow, okay. So we project order even onto chaos to try and grasp it. Given this fundamental landscape of order and chaos, why does the source argue we need these ordering principles, these rules and values?
Because we have to navigate this reality somehow, both as individuals and together in groups. We need rules, standards, values to chart a course. The material uses this striking image, calls us pack animals, beasts of burden.
This is burden. That sounds kind of harsh.
It's direct, yeah. But the implication isn't just negative, it's functional. It suggests our nature requires a load, something meaningful to carry, something to strive for. Maybe, as it puts it, to justify our miserable existence.
So routines, traditions, they're part of order because they simplify things, make life manageable.
Exactly. They make our behavior predictable to others, which allows cooperation, even just peaceful competition within known rules. A shared belief system, a shared value structure. It's not just a nice to have, it's essential for working together.
Why is having a system of values so critical for just functioning?
Well, the argument is that without value, people are paralyzed. They can't act. They can't even really perceive the world properly because both action and perception need a goal. And a goal, by definition, is something you value.
Okay, so value directs action and even perception.
And think about positive emotion. The source argues we feel good not when we achieve some static happiness, but when we see ourselves moving towards something we value. Progress is key. And progress implies a valued destination.
Right, that makes sense. Your ability to feel good, to function, is tied to that internal compass.
Precisely. And this ties directly into the reality of suffering. The book is really unflinching here. Pain, anxiety, they're presented as just part of the deal. Intrinsic to being human because we're fragile, we're mortal, we're exposed to chaos, and also to the potential tyranny of too much order.
And that baseline level of suffering, it can make just chasing happiness seem a bit flimsy.
Yeah.
Especially when a real tragedy hits.
That's exactly the argument. Suffering can make a mockery of just seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. We need something more robust, something to set against the suffering that is intrinsic to being, something that makes the struggle seem worthwhile.
And that something is meaning.
Yes, that's where meaning comes in, and why it's framed as absolutely essential. Meaning isn't about feeling good all the time. It comes from having a profound system of value that orients you, guides your actions, helps you interpret things.
And without that,
Without it, the perspective is that the horror of existence rapidly becomes paramount. That's the path to nihilism, hopelessness, despair, the feeling that nothing matters, so the suffering is just pointless agony.
so it's not just life lacking purpose without meaning, it becomes actively unbearable.
That's the idea presented. Meaning arises from the interaction between all the possibilities the world throws at you, chaos, and having a value structure, an aim within that world that's oriented towards making things better, towards the betterment of being, that's order.
So if your internal compass points towards improvement, towards reducing suffering, creating order, then the struggle itself becomes meaningful.
Yes, that meaning is the antidote. It sustains you through the chaos and the suffering.
And it's tied to our actions, to that feeling of progress we talked about.
Right. And meaning is described as the mature replacement for just acting on impulse or doing what's expedient, what's easiest, or feels good right now. Expediency ignores the future. Meaning emerges when you regulate those impulses, organize them, unify them under a coherent long-term value system. It involves sacrificing the immediate for the future good.
Speaking of the darker side, the material does touch on the problem of evil, too.
It does, yeah. It's mentioned as maybe a lesser problem in frequency compared to just navigating everyday suffering and chaos, but still deeply significant. The human capacity for doing evil for its own sake, the idea that some people find actual pleasure or satisfaction in destruction and hurting others, that's acknowledged. Milton's Paradise Lost gets referenced.
And Solzhenitsyn's point about the line between good and evil.
Cutting through every human heart. Yeah, not between groups, but within each person. Even in the darkest corners, there are levels of malevolence we might not want to imagine.
Okay, so tying this back to the title, An Antidote to Chaos. It's not just about external rules. It's deeply about finding and living by these internal ordering principles, meaning values to withstand the suffering, the chaos outside, and also the potential darkness inside us and in the world.
That's exactly it. It's about finding that path, that straight and narrow path, walking that line between too much rigid order and being overwhelmed by chaos. On that path, you're stable enough to function, but you're still exploring, changing, fixing things, working with others.
And that's where meaning is found, which is presented as the only real justification for life and its inherent difficulties.
Right. Living properly, aiming at betterment, might let us tolerate our own vulnerability or fragility without falling into resentment or destructive ideologies like totalitarianism, which promise certainty but crush the soul.
That focus on meaning and finding the right path really sets us up to talk about some modern challenges, especially around truth, morality, and denial.
Absolutely. A big theme is a critique of moral relativism.
You mean the idea that right and wrong aren't fixed?
Yeah.
That it's all just opinion or depends on your culture or upbringing?
Exactly. Or the related idea, which the source associates with some postmodern thought, that morality is just one group imposing its power on another. Arbitrary power plays, basically.
And the consequence argued in the book, an overemphasis on tolerance, maybe, to the point where being judgmental is the worst sin, even if you're judging something genuinely harmful.
Right. And this, the source claims, leads to a generation left untutored in practical wisdom, dismissing thousands of years of thought on how to live well, how to acquire virtue, seeing it all as just outdated or oppressive. The word virtue itself sounds old-fashioned in that context.
So the argument is that this skepticism towards tradition, towards history, towards these old stories has left a kind of vacuum.
That's the claim. That even highly educated people can miss the deep psychological or evolutionary truths embedded in ancient myths or religious texts, seeing them just as primitive or opposed to science, rather than potentially complementary ways of understanding ourselves.
And directly connected to this is a really strong emphasis on truth-telling, not just avoiding outright lies, but like deep personal honesty in speech.
Yeah, this is huge and comes up again and again. It's more than just not lying. The source shares a really striking personal story about realizing that for a long time, almost everything I said was untrue.
Wow.
Not necessarily big malicious lies, but speech driven by wanting to win arguments, look good, impress people, get ahead, using language not to reflect reality, but to manipulate it, to bend and twist the world to fit what was desired.
That's a heavy self-critique.
Yeah.
And the suggested practice to counter that.
Only saying things that the internal voice would not object to. It means constantly checking yourself. Am I saying this because it's true or because I want something? Am I being sincere?
It sounds exhausting.
It's presented as a difficult, ongoing discipline. The core advice when you're lost or confused is stark. What should you do when you don't know what to do? Tell the truth.
And the idea is that lying, when you do it, you know you're doing it. It's conscious. And these little acts of untruth, of inauthenticity, they don't just affect you. They add up. They corrupt the individual, and eventually they corrupt the state, the society you live in.
Right. There's this concept of the voice of inauthenticity. When things go wrong, it doesn't look inward. It blames everything else. Did I get what I wanted? No. Okay.
Yeah.
The world's unfair. It's someone else's fault. This denial of responsibility is presented as a dangerous path, potentially leading to resentment and even destruction.
This connects to that concept of the big lie from propaganda analysis, which the source brings up.
Yeah, drawing on Hitler's observations. The disturbing idea that a massive, colossal lie can actually be more believable than a small one. Why? Because it's so outrageous, people find it hard to believe anyone would make up something that big. Their own sense of scale is violated.
And it appeals more to emotion than reason.
That's the argument, corrupting the deeper strata of their emotional nature. So even if you present facts contradicting the big lie, people might still doubt, still waver, because the lie has taken root emotionally.
And the danger of all this, the lack of truth, the denial, the big lies, is linked directly to societies falling apart. Solzhenitsyn's work on the Soviet Union is used as a key example.
Right. Solzhenitsyn saw a direct cause and effect between the horrors of the Soviet state and the way ordinary citizens learned to falsify their own experience, to deny the suffering the state caused them. This collective bad faith, this denial, this complicity in the lie, actually enabled the atrocities, in his view.
So Solzhenitsyn's act of writing the Gulag Archipelago, of telling the truth about it all, was a direct assault on that system of lies.
Exactly. It exposed the rot. And it highlights the idea that things naturally decay, things fall apart. What worked yesterday, whether it's a personal belief or a social system, might not work today. We inherit structures, but each generation has to pay attention, repair, update.
And if you ignore the need for repair, through blindness, laziness, or just deliberate deceit,
then you speed up the decay. The warning is pretty stark. Without attention, which requires telling the truth about problems, culture degenerates and dies, and evil prevails.
So truth-telling isn't just a personal virtue. It's presented as existentially necessary for keeping individuals, families, and societies functional. It's about facing reality, however ugly, so you can fix things and avoid collapse.
That's the core idea. It's foundational.
Which leads us nicely into the next big theme, sacrifice. And its incredibly deep roots in, well, everything from ancient stories to basic human psychology.
Yeah, sacrifice is presented as this fundamental human discovery, and it's tied directly to us figuring out time, cause and effect, and the fact that our actions matter.
It's described basically as delay of gratification, right?
Yes, but in a really profound way, more than just the marshmallow test. The argument is that learning to delay gratification was simultaneous with discovering time and causality. We started to grasp that what we do now affects what happens later.
That's a huge realization. So we figured out that reality was structured as if it could be bargained with.
Exactly. Behave properly, now control your impulses, think about the future, consider others, and you can get rewards later in a future that doesn't even exist yet. This ability to regulate ourselves, to act now for a future good, is presented as basically the foundation of organized society.
It allows for planning, saving, building.
Right. It makes the social contract possible. It allows today's work to be stored reliably for tomorrow. Society isn't just rules. It's built on this principle of sacrificing the immediate for the future.
And the biblical story of Cain and Abel is used as a central example of this whole dynamic.
Right. So humanity learns to make sacrifices to God, who kind of represents reality or being itself. Abel sacrifices, his offering is accepted, he thrives. Cain also sacrifices, he works the land, but his offering is rejected.
And that rejection, even though he did make an effort, makes him incredibly bitter. His work feels meaningless.
Yeah, the source says, under such conditions, the world darkens and the soul rebels. Cain is just consumed by resentment. He feels the universe is unfair.
He confronts God, basically accuses him of unfairness, curses creation. And God's response in the story isn't, sorry, my bad. It's more like, the problem is you, Cain. You entertained sin. You let bitterness take root. You knowingly and creatively dallied with sin.
Not the answer Cain wanted, obviously. His bitterness just gets worse, and he plots revenge, not just against Abel, but against existence itself. He murders Abel, who represents, in this reading, Cain's own ideal, what he could be but isn't, maybe because he couldn't make the right kind of sacrifice.
So he kills his ideal out of spite, to protest against the unfairness of it all.
Yeah, to register his fundamental opposition to existence. And the story shows how this act of evil, born of resentment, just spirals downwards. Cain's descendants become even worse, compounding the violence.
It's a really stark illustration of how rejected sacrifice, or the feeling of rejected sacrifice, can lead down a very dark path. Bitterness, resentment, and ultimately a rejection of life itself.
Exactly. It's a powerful warning about resentment, and it connects back to Nietzsche's idea, which the source references, that suffering doesn't have to lead to nihilism. You have a choice in how you interpret it.
You might expect someone who goes through terrible suffering or witnesses evil to just become bitter and pass it on, right?
And that definitely happens. The source acknowledges this, talks about soldiers with PTSD struggling not just with trauma, but sometimes with the darkness they found within themselves. But it also strongly emphasizes the other possibility. You can learn good by experiencing evil.
Like the bullied kid who decides not to bully others.
Yeah.
Or the abused child who becomes a loving parent.
Precisely. And the source points to a specific statistic presented as evidence. The vast majority of people abused as children do not go on to abuse their own kids. This is offered as proof of the genuine dominance of good over evil in the human heart. If abuse just cascaded exponentially, the world would be unimaginably worse.
That ability to turn suffering into something positive is linked to taking personal responsibility, even in the worst circumstances. Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag again.
Yeah, despite everything, he didn't just become vengeful. He asked himself the incredibly hard question. Did I contribute to this catastrophe in any way? Did my past actions, my compromises, my lies play any part in this?
In the middle of that horror, he reviewed his life, looking for moments he acted against his conscience, betrayed himself.
And that act of radical introspection, of owning his own potential for error, even amidst massive external evil, that offered a path. It's where that advice comes from. Stop doing what you know to be wrong. Start stopping today. You don't need a PhD in ethics. You often just know when you're doing something wrong.
So cleaning up your own act, facing your own flaws, that's a form of sacrifice too.
Yeah.
Sacrificing the comfort of blaming others.
Exactly. Sacrificing denial for the possibility of future good, for yourself and maybe for the world.
This idea of self-honesty and improvement leads us straight into the challenge of actually knowing yourself and getting better.
Which is presented as way harder than we usually think. Who are you? You think you know, but maybe you don't. The simple idea that you're just a rational captain steering your own ship. The source challenges that.
It says we're not fully master or slave of ourselves. Like, you can't just force yourself to do things perfectly.
Right. You can't just command yourself like a drill sergeant and expect perfect obedience. You have interests, limits. Some things engage you. Others feel like pulling teeth. There's this complex, sometimes irrational nature in you that you can't just bully into shape.
So how do you get to know this complex self?
The suggestion is you need to step back. Observe yourself like you're a stranger. What are your actual habits, preferences, limits? What do you really find valuable or enjoyable? What kind of rest and reward do you actually need to stay motivated, to feel like more than just that beast of burden?
And then,
Yeah.
negotiate.
Hmm.
Make deals with yourself. The example used is making yourself do the dishes by promising coffee afterward.
It sounds simple, almost silly, but it illustrates the principle. You have to figure out what you want, make a fair deal with that part of yourself, and this is crucial, keep the promise. If you're constantly a tyrant to yourself, always demanding, never rewarding, punishing every slip-up, eventually that inner you will just rebel or shut down. You won't cooperate with yourself.
So self-knowledge involves understanding this inner complexity and learning to work with it, not just against it.
Exactly. And when it comes to actually improving, the advice is often, well, counterintuitive. Aim small.
Don't try to overhaul everything at once. Your job, relationships, habits, the world.
Right. Recognize your limits, your limited talents, your tendency to deceive yourself, the burden of resentment you might carry, your ability to shirk responsibility. Acknowledge all that.
So instead,
Set a tiny goal, the absolute minimum. Make life a tiny bit better than it was this morning. Ask yourself, what could I do that I would actually do to make things a tiny bit better? And what small reward would I appreciate?
and then just do it, even badly, and give yourself the reward.
Yeah. Even if it feels awkward or undeserved at first, do the small thing, give the small reward, then repeat it daily. The real magic, the source argues, is in the consistency. Your baseline of comparison gets a little higher each day. It's compound interest for your life.
Do that for a few years and things could genuinely change. Then you can aim higher.
That's the idea. Small, consistent steps, negotiated fairly with yourself. It builds momentum.
This process of setting aims, even tiny ones, ties into another really core concept. What you aim at determines what you see.
This one's huge. It draws on biology, psychology, the idea that we don't just passively perceive reality as it is. Our goals, our values, what we're aiming for right now, they act like powerful filters. They screen out most of the overwhelming information out there and highlight only what seems relevant to our current aim.
So these aims literally shape our perception. They're built into us.
Pretty much. They become habitual, part of our structure, our nervous system. They orient us. So if you're unhappy, if life feels meaningless or stuck, the source suggests maybe the problem isn't life itself. Maybe it's what you want. Maybe your current aim, your value structure is off. Maybe it's blinding you to what you actually need or what other possibilities exist.
Wow. So the solution might be right there, but you literally can't see it because you're looking for something else.
Exactly. If things aren't working, consider that maybe your current knowledge is insufficient, not life itself. It's a radical kind of responsibility. Maybe the map you're using is wrong. Maybe your value structure needs some serious retooling. Your deepest desires might be the very things blinding you.
And sometimes that means letting go of those old aims, old values, even if they feel like part of who you are, because their time has come.
It's tough work. Brutal self-honesty, being flexible enough to change your most fundamental assumptions about what's good and what to pursue. It's like repairing the culture, but on a personal level. Attend to yourself, see what's broken or outdated, and rebuild.
That idea of diagnosing what's wrong and finding a path forward seems like a good transition to the practical side of psychology, how we understand ourselves and others, especially in relationships.
Yeah, and there's a neat analogy from chemistry used here. The supersaturated solution.
Right, like dissolving way more sugar in hot water than it can hold when cool. It's unstable but clear.
Yeah.
Then you drop one crystal in.
And boom, all the excess sugar suddenly crystallizes out. The analogy is for people who are deeply confused, whose minds are in chaos. They're supersaturated with problems, anxieties, undifferentiated thoughts.
So what's the sugar crystal in this analogy?
Adopting any reasonably coherent system of interpretation. Could be Freudian ideas, Jungian archetypes, maybe even a strong religious framework. Bringing those chaotic elements together under some disciplined structure helps meaning crystallize. It provides coherence, a way to make sense of things, makes you feel good for something because you have a map, a way to act.
So the structure itself, any coherent structure, can kickstart the process of finding order in the internal chaos.
It provides that initial point of order, yeah. Another psychological tool discussed is memory. And the argument is that memory isn't just a perfect recording of the past.
It's described as a tool.
Memory is the past's guide to the future. Its main job, from this perspective, is to stop the same damn thing from happening over and over. We don't remember everything equally. We remember the problems, the traumas, the unresolved stuff, specifically so we can analyze it, figure out what went wrong, and hopefully not repeat the mistake.
So memory isn't passive, it's active, a tool for learning and survival.
That's the framing. Pragmatic, survival-oriented.
When dealing with complex experiences, especially in therapy, is highlighted. The example of the client asking, "Was I raped?"
Right. The source presents this not as a simple yes-no question with a factual answer waiting to be found, but as infinitely complex, a psychological hydra. Trying to answer it raises dozens of other questions. What is rape? Consent? Caution? Fault? Betrayal? Power? You cut off one head, 7 more appear.
And untangling that requires careful listening, dialogue.
Exactly. It's often not something you can solve with a quick answer or just objective facts, because in those deeply personal, often traumatic situations, there was no objective observer. There are only subjective viewpoints, fragmented memories. Though, importantly, some interpretations are seen as healthier, more adaptive, closer to a functional truth than others.
This kind of deep exploration leads to the difference the source makes between real thinking and just rationalizing.
Real thinking is described, maybe surprisingly, as listening to yourself, which is hard. It means being at least 2 people at the same time, letting different parts of you disagree, having a real internal debate.
So it's not just thoughts flowing, it's an active, critical dialogue inside your head.
Yes. And the key is not to set up straw men, weak arguments you can easily knock down. That's not thinking. That's just rationalizing what you already believe. It's propaganda for yourself, hiding from uncomfortable truths because you don't want to change or admit you might be wrong.
And this internal listening mirrors how we should listen to others.
Very much so. True listening is about giving the other person the space to clarify their own thoughts. Often, people can't figure out what they think until they say it out loud to someone who is genuinely listening without jumping in to fix it or judge it.
Like Freud having patients on the couch, not looking at them,
Yeah,
to minimize his influence.
exactly. Let their own voice emerge. And his insistence that analysts be analyzed themselves was to uncover their own biases so they wouldn't project them onto patients.
Modern therapy often involves conversation, seeing expressions.
Yeah. And the example given is the client who blurts out, "I hate my wife." He hears himself say it, maybe sees the therapist's non-judgmental reaction, and through that process of speaking and self-listening starts to untangle it. He realizes it connects to his parents' dynamic, realizes he was maybe possessed unconsciously by the spirit of his father, acting out an old pattern.
Hearing it out loud in that safe space allowed the insight, cleared the fog.
Right, and the source claims that if you can manage to truly listen, people will often tell you almost everything with very little deceit because you've created the space for honesty. And here's a practical tip. If the conversation is boring, you probably aren't listening properly. Boredom suggests you've stopped exploring.
That's a good check. The source also contrasts this real listening with other, less productive ways we talk.
Yeah, like dominance hierarchy maneuvers, or the point isn't really sharing ideas, it's just jockeying for status. Telling a slightly better story to one-up someone often feels a bit embarrassing because everyone kind of knows what's going on.
Or just trying to be witty.
Demonstrations of wit, yeah. Still has a dominance element maybe, but aimed at being entertaining. Anything either true or funny had value there.
Familiar territory. But the best kind of conversation
Is mutual exploration. This needs people willing to step into the unknown together, people who are okay with uncertainty being maybe more interesting than certainty. They have to be living their philosophy, not just believing it abstractly. They have to have, as the source puts it, inverted. The typical human preference for order over chaos, to really explore challenging ideas together.
And these insights loop back to relationships, especially when problems get ignored. The dragon story.
There's no such thing as a dragon. Yeah, great analogy. Tiny problem, tiny dragon, ignored by the mother. Because it's ignored, it grows huge, eats all the pancakes, carries off the house. It wanted to be noticed.
Ignoring problems makes them grow. Obvious, but we do it.
All the time. Relationships are full of things left in the fog because we don't want to deal with them. The source list is all sorts of maybe subconscious reasons people stay in bad situations. Martyrdom, which might feel noble or provide grounds for complaint. Mimicking bad family patterns, seeking passive revenge.
The comfort of the known problem, even a bad one, can seem easier than the scary work of fixing it.
And avoiding the necessary arguments, avoiding confronting those dragons when they're small, means avoiding facing chaos. The reality that the relationship is fragile, Life is fragile, and avoiding facing hell, the capacity in both partners for cruelty, laziness, spite, dishonesty. Huge motivation to avoid that, but it just corrodes things in the long run.
Okay, from adult complexities to raising kids, this section offers some views that definitely push against some common modern ideas about parenting.
It does. It critiques idealistic views, like the idea that kids are just brimming with boundless creativity and rules only stifle it.
The argument here is the opposite, that limits actually help creativity.
Yeah, the source cites scientific literature suggesting significant creativity is rare and actually benefits from structure. Strict limitations provide a framework to push against, facilitating achievement beyond just novelty.
It also challenges the idea that kids naturally make good choices about food or sleep if left alone.
Pushes back hard on that. Claims, based on observation, that they'll often live on junk, partly for attention or power games, fight sleep until they're overtired wrecks, and actively provoke adults and other kids.
Why provoke adults? Seems counterproductive.
The idea presented is that this pushing boundaries helps them map the world, find the limits. It helps them discover the edges of their own too unstructured and terrifying freedom. Knowing where the lines are, what happens when you cross them, actually creates security.
So setting limits provides essential structure and safety, even if they resist it.
And this leads to the argument that actively shaping behavior is necessary. Why else, the source asks, would humans have such a long childhood? We can't shield them from all fear or pain. Learning to walk involves falling. These are necessary parts of learning.
So the goal isn't zero pain, but how to maximize their learning so that useful knowledge may be gained with minimal cost.
Exactly. And sometimes this means using negative consequences, expressing disapproval, or even punishment when necessary, though it should always be done in the most merciful possible manner. It references behaviorists like Skinner. Punishment stops unwanted behavior, reward reinforces desired behavior. Both are tools.
Beyond the parents, there's a huge emphasis on peer socialization.
Absolutely critical. Every child needs to learn how to comply gracefully with the expectations of civil society. Not mindless conformity, but the basic skills to get along, cooperate, make friends. Parents need to reward what leads to success and use consequences to eliminate behavior that leads to misery and failure.
And there's a warning about a tight window of opportunity for this, like by age 4.
Yeah, the research cited suggests if a child hasn't learned basic social play skills by 4, making friends becomes forever difficult. After that age, peers become the main socializers. If a child is consistently rejected by peers, their social development basically stalls.
And that leads to long-term problems, loneliness, depression.
High risk, friendless child, lonely, possibly antisocial, depressed teen and adult. The source argues our sanity relies heavily on being embedded in a community, being gently nudged back on track by others.
So parental discipline isn't just for the parent's convenience. It's about equipping the child for social survival and psychological health.
And there are principles offered for that discipline. First, like Occam's razor, limit the rules. Rules should not be multiplied beyond necessity. Too many dumb rules undermine respect for the important ones. Keep them few, clear, crucial.
And when a rule is broken, especially an important one,
it needs a consequence. The source references common law's struggle with appropriate severity, but it notes that even modern sanctions for serious misbehavior, theft, assault, often involve physical forms: jail, depriving liberty; time out, isolation, which tap into brain areas related to physical pain, suggests a deep link.
But for immediate danger, toddler in the socket, kid running into the street.
Then the rule is pragmatic. Whatever will stop it fastest, within reason. Hesitation could be fatal. Rule 3 is about knowing your child. Learn how they respond to different interventions and use what works effectively for them, calibrating as you go.
This section also has a really difficult part about the parent's own capacity for evil.
This is crucial and challenges rosy views of parenting. People rarely intend to be bad parents, but the source argues it happens constantly because we all have a capacity for darkness, aggression, selfishness, resentment, deceit, and we're often willfully blind to it.
And the claim is that no adult can really tolerate being constantly dominated by a child, that eventually resentment builds.
Yeah, described graphically as the hierarchical, predatory ape nature. If a child becomes tyrannical, revenge will happen, maybe unconsciously. Parents embarrassed by public misbehavior might punish later with the cold shoulder, withdrawing affection or opportunity. Enough embarrassment, disobedience, and dominance challenge, and even the most hypothetically selfless parent will become resentful.
And resentment breeds vengeance, leading to less love, fewer opportunities, a kind of subtle family warfare.
That's the danger highlighted. Resentment poisons the well. So the goal isn't a perfectly quiet, obedient child. It's a properly socialized 3-year-old, polite, engaging, but not a doormat. This kind of child is welcomed by others, which is ultimately better for their confidence and individuality than avoiding all conflict through lack of discipline.
It's about finding that balanced warmth and clear boundaries to raise competent kids who can navigate the world.
A realistic approach, acknowledging flaws in both adults and kids.
Okay, shifting from the family to broader society, the material gets into gender, progress, and some perspectives that definitely push against certain common narratives.
It does. There's a direct assertion about biological factors influencing sex differences, arguing this is often downplayed or denied in favor of purely social constructionist views.
It points to data from Scandinavia, societies that pushed hardest for gender equality.
Right. Arguing the data shows outcomes opposite to what pure social constructionism would predict. The statement is blunt. This isn't a debate. The data are in. This directly challenges views that see biology as irrelevant or just a tool for oppression. Instead, it suggests innate differences play a role alongside socialization, especially in free societies where competence tends to rise.
And this perspective connects to challenges facing boys and young men today.
Yeah. It mentions university students, especially men in humanities, struggling mentally, partly attributed to feeling constantly critiqued as privileged beneficiaries of the patriarchy, sexually suspect, etc., without much balance.
And points to data like boys falling behind in education, citing the Economist article, The Weaker Sex, and women now being the majority in most university fields.
Yes, presenting these as indicators of a real shift. It also touches on typical male traits, liking competition, maybe less inclination toward obedience, adolescent drive to challenge authority, and suggests schools, often rewarding compliance, might not be the best fit for that kind of energy.
And mentions the awkward social dynamics around boys competing with girls.
The asymmetry, yeah. Where it's okay for a girl to win or lose against a boy, but often awkward for a boy to beat a girl or lose to one, adds complexity. So it's a mix of potential biology, changing norms, institutional fit, offered as factors in male struggles.
The source also addresses women leading high-powered careers.
Presents it as common knowledge in big firms. Many women eventually want more time, flexibility. After intense education and early career, other interests emerge, often family.
And it pushes back on explanations like only lack of childcare or male definitions of success being the cause.
Right. Suggests these women often can afford childcare and understand the market demands, like the 650-hour lawyer needing to be available 24/7. The indication is that for some, it's also a conscious choice based on shifting personal values and priorities, not solely external barriers.
This leads into a wider point about culture itself being both oppressive and a gift.
Exactly. Acknowledges culture as oppressive. Uses strong metaphors. Tyrannical king, ghost, machine, monster. It limits potential, becomes outdated, needs constant challenge.
But it also gives us everything.
Pretty much. Every word, every thought is an inherited gift. The infrastructure, relatively stable systems, technology, wealth, lifespan, freedom in the West, all presented as a massive, often unacknowledged gift from ancestors. Culture takes, but in fortunate places, it gives back far more.
So seeing culture only as oppressive is seen as ignorant and ungrateful, as well as dangerous.
Yes. Critique is necessary, but dismissing the immense positive inheritance is foolish and risky.
And it challenges simple narratives about the patriarchy by pointing to male inventors whose work massively benefited women.
Like the inventor of the modern tampon, Dr. Haas, or Gregory Pincus and the birth control pill. Were they oppressors or liberators? It pushes for complexity over simple ideological labels. History and society are messy. Contributions and oppressions aren't neatly divided along group lines.
It's a call to look deeper than the surface narrative. And navigating all this complexity requires having a clear direction, right? Which brings us to the power of aim and vision.
Yeah, this circles back to the core call to action, but elevates it. It's a direct command to the individual facing life's messiness.
Confront the chaos of being, face it. Then take aim against a sea of troubles. Actively orient yourself.
It's about agency. Specify your destination and chart your course. Decide what you're striving for. Admit to what you want. Be honest with yourself. Tell those around you who you are. Be authentic. And crucially, again, be precise in your speech.
That precision in language keeps coming back. Using words carefully to describe reality, fix the past accurately, helps you navigate the present and aim for a better future.
And the highest aim shouldn't just be about your success.
Right. The harder game, Aim for a better life for yourself and your family, friends, even strangers. It acknowledges extending this to enemies is incredibly hard, enmity compounds, but the ideal is held high. Aim high. Set your sights on the betterment of being.
This is the ultimate positive goal. Align yourself in your soul with truth and the highest good. Not just philosophy, but a necessary orientation because despite the suffering, there's good work to do. Habitable order to establish and beauty to bring into existence. Plus, evil to overcome, suffering to ameliorate, and yourself to better. That provides the challenge and purpose.
And this links to the Sermon on the Mount as the peak Western ethic.
Described that way, yeah. The culminating ethic, the essence of the wisdom of the New Testament, moving beyond just don't do bad things like the Ten Commandments for a child or early society, to a positive vision, the individual actively striving to create good.
Not just self-control, but a fundamental desire to set the world right.
But there's a crucial caveat added. You can't aim effectively, especially at the highest good, if you're completely undisciplined. You won't know what to aim at or how to move towards it. And that mismatch high ideals, no competence can lead to despair, feeling there's nothing to aim for, when the real issue is your own lack of preparation.
The Christian stories are used symbolically here too. Christ providing sustenance.
Yeah, multiplying breadfish, water to wine, interpreted not literally, but as the generative power that comes from living oriented towards the highest good. Meaning itself provides sustenance.
So meaning is a call to the pursuit of higher meaning as the mode of living that is simultaneously most practical and of highest quality.
Live as the archetypal savior lives, and you and those around you will hunger no more. The idea is, orienting towards betterment taps into a deep wellspring. The beneficence of the world manifests itself to those who live properly. And this meaning is better than bread, better than just material security. It's the satisfaction of a life aimed right.
And the temptations of Christ. Symbolic challenges on this path.
Exactly. First, turning stones to bread. Overcoming the focus only on material needs. Living properly is better than just having stuff. Second, jumping from the temple. Rejecting the demand for God or reality to magically prove itself or save you personally. Taking responsibility, not demanding narcissistic displays.
And the third, being offered worldly kingdoms for worshiping evil.
To get the ultimate prize, the kingdom of God, the highest meaning, paradise, you have to reject immediate power grabs, reject destructive desires, reject the temptations of evil, which just make things worse. Ordinary sacrifice keeps ordinary tragedy away, but confronting real evil requires a special kind of sacrifice, maybe everything.
There's also that symbolic exercise, the pen of light, to write guiding words.
Right. What do you write? Q. What to do tomorrow? A. The most good possible in the shortest period of time. Efficient action. Q. What about next year? A. Try to ensure that the good I do then will be exceeded only by the good I do the year after that. Compounding good.
And the one about enlightenment. Replacing the enlightened one with the true seeker of enlightenment. There is only the one who is seeking further enlightenment.
Profound, no static perfection. Proper being is a process, always seeking, always becoming.
What about greed? Remember that it is truly better to give than to receive.
Challenges the view of the world as just stuff to grab. Sees it as a place for sharing. Giving improves things, inspires others, multiplies good.
And ruining the rivers. Seek for the living water and let it cleanse the earth.
Suggests environmental problems might be spiritual or psychological at root. Echoes the idea. Fix yourself first. Rule your own spirit before you try to rule the city or fix the world. Maybe ordering ourselves gives us the wisdom to order the world.
So these provide a kind of symbolic compass for aiming your life towards the highest good, using your limited time effectively.
Which brings us to the last section, focusing on limitation itself and human fortitude.
The idea that being needs limits is explored using Superman.
Yeah, kind of funny, but makes the point. When Superman got so powerful he could do anything, move planets, ignore nukes, he became boring. The franchise almost died. A hero who can do anything isn't really a hero. No struggle, no specificity, nothing admirable.
He needed limits to be interesting, like vulnerability to kryptonite, dependence on the sun.
Exactly. Rebooted with limits, he became compelling again. The argument, being of any reasonable sort appears to require limitation. Maybe because being requires becoming, growing, striving, and that's only possible if you're limited. An omnipotent being lacks limitation, which is what makes struggle and heroism possible for us.
That paradox limitation is necessary for meaning and growth.
Right. And despite these necessary limits, despite how hard life is, all the ways things can go wrong, the material pauses to admire human resilience, calls it a miracle of fortitude.
Just observing that wounded people, people who've suffered immensely, are still somehow holding it together, that act itself is seen as miraculous, demanding fortitude and perseverance worthy of genuine and heartfelt admiration.
It's acknowledging the incredible, often invisible effort people put in just to keep going, care for others, contribute, despite the hardships. The quiet heroism of endurance.
This section also briefly revisits danger and mastery, using the skateboarding example. Do not bother children when they are skateboarding.
Right. Kids, often boys, doing dangerous stuff on skateboards. Testing limits. Described as making themselves useful, maybe preparing for a dangerous world. Connects to how this drive, if misused, can lead to antisocial behavior, more common in males, but that not all daring is bad.
Things like doing donuts in cars, talking back to teachers, within reason, taking tough jobs. These are seen partly as testing limits of machines, authority, self.
Yeah, pushing boundaries to see if they hold, to develop competence. The source suggests it's often strength, not weakness, a drive for mastery, that pushes some, especially young men, out of classrooms into harder, riskier pursuits.
And connects this to men having little patience for dependent men, because they need to be capable of looking after others, and women wanting a capable partner.
It suggests a deep drive for competence, independence, utility, especially in males. It can go wrong, but fundamentally it's about becoming capable in a challenging world.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, from order and chaos to truth, sacrifice, self-knowledge, relationships, parenting, society, aiming high, the constant theme is the difficulty of existence, the suffering. But the counter theme is confronting it all with truth, strong values, sacrifice, responsibility, and a clear, meaningful aim.
It's a dense framework, yeah. Drawing from mythology, religion, psychology, history, trying to offer a map for living responsibly and finding meaning despite the challenges. No easy answers, doesn't ignore the darkness, but points towards resilience, truth, and the potential for betterment.
We have certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We looked at chaos and order, the absolute need for meaning to counter suffering, why telling the truth is so critical, the deep roots of sacrifice, the hard work of knowing and improving yourself, how listening really works, the challenges of raising kids, perspectives on gender and society, and the power of aiming high even within our limits.
There really is a call for rigorous self-reflection and deliberately orienting yourself towards the good.
And let's leave you with this final thought from the material, something to chew on. It is better, proverbially, to rule your own spirit than to rule a city. It's easier to subdue an enemy without than one within.
A powerful reminder maybe that the most important frontier to explore and order might just be inside ourselves.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in to the Book Summary Podcast. If you found value in today's episode, hit that like button, subscribe for more summaries, and share it with someone who's ready to grow. Want deeper insights, exclusive book notes, and reading tips? Join our free newsletter. The link's in the description. And don't forget, if you'd like to read the full book, our affiliate link is right below. It helps support the channel and keeps the summaries coming. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing.